Hello listeners, Jordan here. I just want to let you know that you can listen to Nighttime early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Include it with Prime.
You are tuned to the Nighttime Podcast, focused on the fringe of Canada.
Hello listeners. For tonight's episode, I have a very special guest in what I think is a very fascinating topic. Let me frame the episode like this. I'm from a small island on the east coast of Canada called Cape Breton. The island, it's known around the world for both its breathtaking shorelines and its access to natural resources. For the people who live on the island, it's this beauty and these resources we turn to for our economy. For as far back as history can take you, inhabitants of Cape Breton Island have found sustenance in our fisheries, our forests, our coal mines, our steel industry, and of course, tourism. All of these industries have brought people around the world to Cape Breton and sent a little bit of Cape Breton all around the world. But one of our island's greatest exports, at least since sometime in the late 90s, will come as a bit of a surprise. One of Cape Breton's residents, an unassuming fella with a smile much bigger than his ego, is responsible for some of the world's biggest songs by some of the world's biggest artists. It's fair to say that Cape Breton's Gordie Sampson was able to send a little bit of Cape Breton Island to more people than our natural industries ever could. And he has the Grammys to prove it. After achieving success in Canada as a solo performer, a singer-songwriter type, Gordie really found his stride in writing songs for others. In fact, stride is probably the wrong word to use. Gordie, who is now based in Nashville, is straight-up songwriting royalty. As it all turned out, his ability to connect clever lyrics with traditional Celtic-inspired melody has made him a go-to for country music's biggest stars. To name just a few, Gordie's songs were recorded by the likes of Willie Nelson, Faith Hill, Keith Urban, Trisha Yearwood, Luke Bryan, Martina McBride, Lady Antebellum, Brad Paisley, Leanne Rimes, Miley Cyrus, Bon Jovi, and of course, his biggest is probably the Grammy award-winning song Jesus Take the Wheel, which was recorded and performed by Carrie Underwood. So yeah, it's needless to say, Gordie Sampson has valuable insight and a hell of a lot of stories. So let's get to it. Tonight, in this episode of Nighttime, I'm proud to be joined by Cape Breton's hitmaker, Gordie Sampson. Gordie, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you here.
Hey, Jordan. Thanks for having me, man.
So you are stuck in small town Cape Breton. Is that a positive thing to be pandemic stranded?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it is. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's weird to just, it's not weird to be home. It's actually lovely. It's great to be home. But you're not in your own house and you're not in the town you usually work in. But I mean, that isn't a whole lot different for me than most people right now.
Yeah, and you've been, for the last several years, you've been living somewhere much warmer than the east coast of Canada. You're home from Nashville.
Yeah.
Is there much of a difference between the two cities? I imagine Nashville is a lot more like belt buckles and cowboy boots, or is that just the movies?
I mean, I think that when people visit Nashville now, I mean, it's easy to think that. That's what I would think if I was going to Nashville for the first time. But it's so much more. It's quite a bit more metropolitan than it used to be. The restaurant scene and everything, just like pretty much anywhere is. But Nashville in particular has experienced a massive tourism boom, massive real estate boom, all that kind of good stuff. And so, what that does to a city, it sort of, everything gets gentrified and expensive and all that kind of stuff. So, a lot of the people that lived in Nashville their whole lives that are kind of older and some of them, maybe the more conservative folks, are kind of upset because they feel like they're losing their city. The old historic building that used to be EMI Recording Studios gets knocked down and a condo gets put there, and it's just that part of it's kind of sad.
Yeah.
But and I've been there 15 years, so I feel like I just got there at the end of old Nashville, if you will, and have sort of lived through just seeing a bit of that into the new Nashville.
But you get to rub elbows with a lot of people from old Nashville. I actually, just the other night, I watched Willie Nelson singing one of your songs at some big, Farm Aid kind of concert. So before we get into talking about your career, why don't you just, I get that the music industry is a complicated business with a whole bunch of moving parts. Why don't you just give me an idea of what your role in the whole thing is? What are you doing nowadays?
I am primarily a songwriter producer, so I'm a songwriter. I mean, it's first and foremost and I've been doing it pretty much full time since I was really around 30, early 30s. It kicked in. I'm in my late 40s now, but it's sort of where I ended up. I had a taste of being a solo artist, made some records, a couple of records. And that was really fun, but, realized through that process, once I discovered this, which is the thing I'm still doing, that that really felt like what I was, put on the earth to do, and still does.
Yeah, and I know a bit of your background, because we grew up in, in the same kind of scene, like the music scene in Cape Breton area. I'm surprised that given your place now in the music business, you don't really have a formal background in music. Can you tell me how you got into music to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, most of that comes from my mom, is very, very musical, still plays shows, teaches music. But when I grew up, her job was playing in a band. So when you grow up in that kind of environment, any kind of music as a profession, however big or small, is not foreign at all. It's what you it's what you learn. So in that sense, it was always very natural for me. Although, some people ask me, did I always know I was going to do something with it? The answer is no. I mean, it wasn't that cut and dried. I knew that I was going to always play music and be part of it, but I didn't have so much confidence in it that I just knew I was going to do it professionally for a living. I mean, I was, but luckily I did. And, it's a long, hard road for anybody. And you have to put in a lot of time, and a lot of people give up. And thankfully mine was pretty good. It wasn't that, it was fairly fast. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, and when I look at your career, it just seems like you see these obvious steps that you took throughout your career, which is, I think is really, really cool to see. I guess you would have cut your teeth in the beginning, in the Cape Breton music scene, and you started as in rock bands. You're known now more for country music, but did you at that point in your career? Did you have any aspirations to, be a famous performer or anything? Or what was the plan at that point?
I mean, it was a dream, but one that was kind of not really within reach. It was like you're kind of reaching for it, knowing that it's kind of or thinking that it's out of your reach. But yes, I mean, I did start off, I played in high school. After high school, I played in cover band for a second and toured the Maritimes, and then played with Real World for a couple of years. And at that time, right at the end, I was at the end of playing with Real World. I at that time I was discovering Celtic music in a big way, and most people that grow up in Cape Breton that are really embedded in the Gaelic culture, fiddle culture, and etc., kind of grow up with it. being a big part of their lives from the time they're 3 years, step dancing when they're 3 years old, et cetera, et cetera. There was an appreciation for it in my family, but it wasn't that. So I was kind of discovering Celtic music from ground zero in the back door, basically at 18, 19 years old. And that kind of informed a lot of the journey I had in my 20s. Played with Ashley McIsaac, then for a couple of years, Rita McNeil for a little bit, and the Rankins for a few years. And by the time I got through those things, I was in my late 20s, and the songwriting thing was sort of really becoming very interesting to me, and I was taking that pretty seriously and started going to Nashville. Had a couple of hits in Canada before I went there, like with writing with either the Rankins or Ashley, a couple of other bands, Crush, just like people that were in the circuit around the Maritimes, and went to Nashville and started doing the thing there. And that was pretty humble for a year or two until Jesus Take the Wheel happened, sort of around there.
I'm guessing that changed everything.
Well, it did. I mean, a couple of things happened at the same time. Jesus Take the Wheel was one of them, and then I got some pretty major cuts with like Faith Hill and Keith Urban and stuff like that. It was all kind of happening at the same time, so it was sort of raining chunky goodness there for a second, and that changed everything.
Yeah, it's like, and I'm guessing that was around the point that you moved to Nashville. I'm assuming you went there for that opportunity to pursue songwriting full time.
Yeah, I really did. Now, at that point, I was still 1 foot in the door and 1 foot out the door as far as being an artist was. So when I got signed to a publishing deal in Nashville, I would have been around 32 years old, I suppose, at that point. But the publisher that signed me as an artist to the publishing deal. And what that means is that they felt they would make their money back by me being a star as opposed to me writing for other stars. That's a different kind of publishing deal. So that was actually my first one. But what happened is that I signed there, and I was sort of giving up on I was becoming less and less interested in being a star, and I hated the road. All that stuff. Did enough of that in my 20s, and just fell in love with the idea of being the Nashville songwriter. You stay in one place, you work out of a studio. Your life is, you start at the same time pretty much every day. I mean, it had so much regularity to it, and it was so unlike the road that it really worked for me.
And now, you didn't jump right into songwriting. Were your career as a solo performer, even after Real World, which had some success in Canada, doing kind of late 80s rock, I guess is how I would describe it. After Real World, as you described there, you were touring with well-known Canadian acts, like writing with Ashley, touring with Rita McNeil. Then you did your solo albums, which were, like, I guess it's hard for me to tell as like just a civilian watching much music, but like your song Sorry seemed like a huge hit, as did Sunburn, but it seemed like you were climbing as a performer. Like, was it a big risk to step away from that and be like, I'm just going to write songs for others?
No, not for me. But it's a question you get a lot, because people that in various interviews I've done, it almost always comes up. Is there a letting go of the songs and your artistry and letting other people record your songs? Didn't feel like that to me at all. I mean, it might feel like that to some. As a matter of fact, I know it feels like that to some. Some people struggle with that. I had zero struggle with that. It's 20 years later, and looking back, I still feel like I have zero struggle with it. Some therapist and psychiatrist may pull that out of me that I am struggling with it and don't know it, but I don't think so.
Yeah, that'll be a problem. That'll be a problem for a couple years to figure out.
Yeah.
Well, it's just when you hear like most, like a famous songwriter, often they're not performers. Like, it seems like it's kind of one or the other for a lot of people. But it's like, I'm sure a lot of the people you're writing with are either basically full-time performers or full-time songwriters. And I would think it would be rare for someone to have a successful career as a performer and then an even more successful career as a songwriter afterwards. Like, is that a like a unique trajectory in that business?
It's fairly unique, but not unheard of. I think of people like in country music, like Radney Foster. He would have had a career similar to that. In pop music, like Sia, even by some it's more popular now in pop and hip hop and R&B for artists to write songs for other artists. That seems to come and go in waves, but Ed Sheeran wrote "Love Yourself" for Justin Bieber, and Sia is a great pop artist and writes all kinds of songs for other folks. And I think that's just the most natural and organic way to do it. It gets complicated. It's the business that makes it complicated. It's the business that makes it hard for that stuff to go. We're all just artists that love each other and kind of want to hang out with each other. But it's such a strange and wonderful business that it gets so complicated.
It was kind of a story that happened in where I grew up in Nova Scotia, and I had a very Catholic aunt that I used to spend a lot of time with. She told me a story about losing control of the car and almost getting in an accident, and she told me how she planned to deal with it. And I just kind of marked it away as a childhood story I heard when I was probably 8 or 9 years old. And about 20 years later, I was driving again in Nova Scotia past an accident scene where a friend of mine had lost her sister. And this childhood memory kind of popped into my brain. I was on my way to Nashville to write with Brett James and Hillary Lindsay, and kind of brought in this idea for a song. And it became Carrie Underwood's first single. It's called Jesus Take the Wheel.
Let me introduce you to somebody who really, in this country right now, needs no introduction. She's country music's female vocalist of the year. #1 most downloaded song on the iPod. Here is American Idol champion, Carrie Underwood.
Jesus, take the wheel, take it from my hands, 'cause I can't do this on my own.
I'm sure you get this often. This is probably the number one question you get most often. But Jesus Take the Wheel, I know a little bit about the background of the song, so I'll tell you what I know, but you can fill in the blanks. But what I really want to hear is how the song got to Carrie Underwood and became, what it is now. Like my understanding is you had the idea for the song after hearing a story from someone in your family about, a car accident when you're a child. Later in life, you thought of that again. How does that turn into, an American Idol taking the song and, winning Grammys and everything else? Tell me the story of kind of the life cycle of that tune.
Well, that's that part of it. And to be honest with you, I don't exactly know verbatim how that worked. But I know the story behind the song, and what you said is basically right. But as far as you write the song, then you have to make a demo of it, a demonstration of it, and which we did. So now there's a fake real version of the song going around. So the writers are demoing it, pretending to be the artist, and saying, "Hey, artist, you should record this. Here's an MP3," and it gets schlepped around like cheese. And that's sort of the Nashville traditional way, and still really is. Many things have changed about Nashville, but this part of it isn't that a whole lot different, even now in 2020. Your publisher receives it and goes, "Oh my God, this is a great song. I'm going to send this over to Carrie Underwood's A&R person at her label or manager or whatever." And it's something like that happened. And that's the sort of semantics of it, I guess, to a lot of people looking from the outside in. But it's interesting to us folks because that's how it gets done. And sometimes in the case of the last hit I had, which was a Luke Bryan song, that was one of the writers texting Luke Bryan saying, "Hey man, have you heard this song?" And just MP3'd it in a text. And 5 minutes later he goes, "I love this song. I'm going to record it." And that was it. It was that simple. Wow. And you can, but there are hundreds and hundreds of stories of songs that go to the song cemetery and just die for every time I could tell that story, you know. But the payoff and the glory is pretty great when you have one, and that's why we do it, because it keeps you going.
Yeah. So with Jesus Take the Wheel, did you, like, when you found out that she was going to perform that song and, you know, make it a single or whatever, I don't think she was as big. Like, she had won American Idol. Is that what her background was? And so this was like her first song coming out of that?
It was. Like, we wrote the song. It sat around for about 6 months after we wrote it. It was pitched a couple of places. It was pitched to one very major female artist. In fairness to her, I won't say who it is, but she passed on it. And that doesn't mean anything. It's not like you go, ha, you passed on my song. Like, songs are not hits. People make them hits, right? So that artist felt like, I don't think I can make that a hit, or that song's not right. So, you know, so it got passed by a couple of people. And then when it landed in Carrie's camp, the simpatico was there, I suppose, you know, for the song, right record, right time. Yeah. And it was her first country single. Yeah.
And did that, like, when that song was done and being passed around, did that song feel any different or special? Like, did you think it was going to be this, like, career changing thing?
We knew it was good, but it, you know, with the word Jesus in the title, you're limiting probably some of your pitches. You know, you'll never get it in a movie if it's got Jesus in the title, because it's too on the nose. So, like, in one sense, it was a little bit bold, I guess, in one way. So it had sort of a narrow path. It was very surprising, to be honest with you. And no, I remember saying to one of my co-writers, is like, "Is there any luck with that Jesus Wheel song? Like, has anybody expressed interest in that?" I seem to recall that was pretty cool. I mean, it was kind of like that, you know.
Wow.
But
once it's performed and it lands and it's, you know, you get a Grammy, it's the #1 country song. Like, what kind of impact does that have on your career? Like, was that like a real turning point, or was that just another step on the road?
It was quite a turning point. Like, you know, the benchmark I often use was, like, at the time I was traveling back and forth from Canada to the US a lot, and I didn't have as good documentation. Like, I have a green card now, but at the time, you know, I was on like an entry-level visa, and you get detained at customs all the time because customs guys don't really understand songwriting. They're like, "Well, you're going down to write songs, okay, so you're making money down there?" And it's like, "Well, no, but I mean, if it becomes a hit, I would." And they're just like scratching their head. They don't know what that means or whatever, right? So I was constantly getting detained. But once I wrote "Jesus Take the Wheel," then the border guards would be like, "Okay, so you write songs, any I know?" And I'd be like, "I wrote that Jesus Take the Wheel song." He's like, "You got to be kidding me! That's my mother's favorite song." And it's like, so that was the most. That was kind of one of the most.
That was the big difference. Yeah.
Like, go ahead, have fun. Write another hit there, kid. All right.
Every so often I watch there's like a show on TV, like Border Control kind of thing, where it's like a reality show where they have cameras in the airports, and it's often people trying to get in and out of like international flight to Canada, and they'll go through their bags looking for things and making sure they're not working here. So I picture the scene where it's Gordie Sampson trying to explain he's going down to Nashville to write songs.
Yeah, it wasn't far from that.
Once that song hits, you're then established as a songwriter for hire in Nashville, I'm assuming. Because it's, when I look at your credits, it's like after that, your songwriting credits, I see all the big names, even people performing some of your old songs from your solo career, like You or Somebody Like You was a hit you had as a solo performer. And then I think it was like Faith Hill did it, or not Faith Hill.
Keith Urban cut that one. Yeah, so there was a bit of that, and then Faith Hill cut a song called Paris that was on a record of mine. So some of the, as I said before, with one foot out the door and one in the artist and writer world, you know, the thing that was sort of helping me make that decision was, even though I was doing records, I was getting some of the cuts I was starting to have happen with other touring artists were being cut right off of my record. So we didn't make a demo of Paris. They just heard the record and they were like, well, that guy, you know, he's kind of an indie artist who's never kind of exploded. Like, this, it's okay to cut this song. No one's heard it yet. And they were right. Essentially, in the big picture, no one had. So that was kind of informing the transition, if you will.
Yeah. And I saw Miley Cyrus did one of your old tunes as well.
Yeah. Well, that's a different kind of thing. That's like that. We wrote that in L.A. So that would be Hillary Lindsay, who, you know, is very grateful to get all the time I can with Hillary. She's one of my best friends and certainly the person I've written more songs with than anyone else. But she and I and John Shanks, an L.A. producer, wrote that song, and he was producing Miley Cyrus at the time. So that's a little bit different. You get a call from John Shanks going, hey, I'm just in the studio with Miley Cyrus, and I played her the song she wrote. She really likes it. She wants to maybe write a bridge for it or change a couple of lines. And at that point, you go from 3 writers on the song to 4. And that's no big deal. One of them is the artist that's going to cut your song, so you know, only a fool would pass on that at the time, you know, in that moment. So that's just a more unusual way to get on the record. But that happens, things like that in pop music a little bit more.
Yeah, I want to hear about kind of the process of putting the song together with an artist, because that's something I think as a outsider we're completely ignorant with. And I think I got a glimpse of it when I watched a documentary recently about one of my favorite of your songs, My Favorite Picture of You, that you co-wrote for or with Guy Clark. There's a performance of Guy Clark, who's like this legendary country western Nashville guy. I call it a documentary, but really it's like a 5-minute piece where he'll eventually perform the song, but he tells the background of the song and, you know, the picture of his wife. And he mentions, you know, I was with this songwriter I had just met named Gordie Sampson. And it sounds like the way he describes it, he made it sound like you were kind of just pitching ideas. And one of the ideas was My Favorite Picture. And he said, yeah, that sounds great. Like, is that how it works? You just have ideas for songs and you go to an artist? Or do you have like half finished or completed songs? Or is it different all the time?
It can be different all the time. There are various ways to approach it and various instruments, if you will, of when I say, you know, tools. And one of the ones that's really popular and age old in the country tradition, especially. Although all kinds of pop songs get written like this too, and other genres as well, is what we call writing from the title, and that is really just exactly what it sounds like. That means you walk into a room, and all I have to if you're Guy Clark, Jordan, all I have to offer you is an idea to write a song called My Favorite Picture of You. At that time I didn't know what it meant, who's in the picture. Who is it sung by a girl? Is it fast? Is it slow? I know nothing. But it's one way to write a song. I'm guilty of writing songs from the title almost every single time. Just because it's sort of my comfort zone. But it's not the only way to do it. Sometimes I forget there's other ways, and it's actually quite refreshing to, you know, you might bring in a guitar riff or something, but when you start to think like a songwriter and you do it every day, I think what happens is the title becomes the anchor for the song, and it anchors it down. So everything revolves around that. And it's not uncommon for me to say, if we're writing something and we got a verse, but we don't know what the chorus is yet, I get stumped. I can't, I actually will kind of get blocked until I know what the song's called. I kind of freeze. Or not necessarily what it's called, but what I shouldn't say what it's called, but what the chorus does and what the aha moment is at the end of the chorus that makes you, dance or make love or cry or whatever the hell you would need to do.
Or all three.
At the same time, which I highly recommend. Yeah.
That song's called Wild Night. My favorite picture of you, that's one where, like, now that you explained that, I can almost see how you wrote it from the title, because it's, what the name of the song, that is the song. It's describing one's favorite picture of another person. And it just so happened that when you pitched that to Guy Clark, it must have just been the right title, the right guy who just happened to have like a photo of his wife who was in ill health right there. And it just, like, was that as magical of a moment as it seems to me when I hear the story be told?
Yes, it's pretty magical. And it's one of those things where, there's no formula to this. There's no formula to magic, but there's a great quote about magic that eludes me right now, but it's something to, if you just keep doing it, you're going to stumble on magical moments, right? It's not like you can just sit down and these are the kind of moments you live for. And but when you do this all your life, they happen more frequently, and the more you do it, and I guess it's sort of like the idea of success inviting success. The more you do it, the more it's like the law of attraction. You sort of attract maybe these moments. I mean, I'm not trying to get metaphysical about it, but I'm just saying, it's you're going to experience those moments more when you do this all the time.
Yeah. Like, do you feel like, as someone who, you don't have like a formal background in songwriting, it's not like you went to like some special English school or something for songwriting. I don't know if there's even schools for that, but do you feel, despite your success and everything, do you feel like you're like good at it, or do you feel like you're just kind of winging it every time and it's working? I'm trying to imagine how it must feel to be able to just have a string of hits and have maintained a forward momentum all this time. Like, what is it that's making this work for you so well?
Yeah, I mean, I think you do have a sense that you're good at it. You have to. I mean, it would be so uncomfortable otherwise. I mean, you can't be too confident. It's like so many other things in this world. If you walk into a writing situation with all kinds of hubris, like, you're just gonna it might not work out for you, because
Willie Nelson's not changing the bridge. I wrote this bridge.
Yeah, you do get comfortable in your skin, and because it's when you start out writing, it's scary. Like, I have been lucky enough to do for the last 10 years a song camp for young Nova Scotian writers, with my manager Sherry, and that's been just so incredible to sort of relive what those first feelings are like. It's scary. It really is. Co-writing is scary. I mean, it's so judgy, and songwriters, by and large, we're usually a little more anxious than normal by nature, and hate being judged even more than the average person. But it's also the thing that makes us better, and it's part of the way we're wired.
How does the co-writing a song, like when I think of a songwriter, and I think when a lot of people think of one, they picture like this poet type, like in a dark room alone, working away at something all through the night. But when I look at your credits for a lot of the songs you wrote, there's like 4 or 5 people in some cases. other than in a band setting, and I don't know if that's how you do it, but like how does that collaboration happen?
Well, for me, they're typically yes, they can be groups of 4 or 5, sometimes 2, never one. I haven't written a song by myself in ages. Pre 2000, it would be in the 90s. Would be the last time I wrote a song by myself. So once you start talking about collaborative writing, it's like sort of sub form or sub art form, of writing songs, which has its own dynamic. But yes, most of the time it's 3 people, because that seems to be the lucky number. There's there's a dynamic to 3 people that works. 4 people is almost like can be too many cooks. It depends on who the personalities are, but you have to be not scared to have ideas. So if you think about it, I'm trying to think of an example. Let's say you and I right now were tasked with the job of coming up with a advertisement scheme for Nissan. I'm just pulling that off the top of my head. So we're writing their campaign, their television commercial, everything. Songwriting is really not that. It's one molecule away from that. It's almost the same thing, I think. I've never done the other, but from what I understand. So if we were doing that, you and I would be the collaborators, and right off the bat, you have to be not scared at all to say whatever comes to your mind. We call it dare to suck. And it's kind of a deal you make with yourself, and the other partner realizes that you're in a very exposed and naked situation. Let's say, by other partner, I mean, let's say you were going to say whatever's on your mind. I realize that this is a situation that's you're putting your soul on the line. So therefore, it's my duty to not judge you too much, and my body language needs to encourage you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's...
if you start writing songs at 20, by the time you're 21, it's second nature. I mean, it doesn't take long for it to become second nature at all. But it is a hurdle that you do have to get over. Mm-hmm. But a small group of people can't do it, or they give up on it, and I'm not sure why that is. It must be a personality trait that just makes it a little harder.
Yeah, but it'd definitely be like a check your ego at the door kind of thing. Like despite you having hits and the other artist maybe being like a well-known performer or something like that, like all that has to stay outside the writing room, or I guess it would never work. Yes,
that's right. Like you also could be, I might have a star in the room for a day. Like let's say Charles Kelly from Lady Annabella. I'm just pick that off my head because I was just texting with him earlier about a song. But, let's say he's in the room and I'm writing with him for the first time. He's a star. I'm like just a peasant songwriter by comparison. Okay. But my job is to not be a yes man. You have to be on level playing field. So you have to forget the other person's notoriety. They're there to benefit from you. And you have to be 100% of what you can be. I mean, you can't feel like you're really any less. You can't feel like you're any more either. But you know what I mean? It has to be a level playing field, and you can't be there. Oh, Charles, oh yeah, man. Oh, I love what you just said. Yeah. No, if you sit there and do that, like that's just not. I mean, you might get something good if you're lucky, but I wouldn't count on it.
Yeah. But that must be hard to do. And like I know I've been watching a lot of your old videos earlier, so I know there was probably a point in your life where you were really into Bon Jovi. Some of the Real World videos look a little bit like early Bon Jovi.
I definitely was into some hair bands. Not Bon Jovi though. I gotta say no. I've never. I've eventually. Anyway, you go. You talk. But you got me thinking now.
Maybe that's more. There's one clip in particular I watched. It was a Real World performance. I think it was maybe in New Brunswick or something. But just the way Jamie Folds, the singer at the time, the way he performed and stuff, I really got like a Bon Jovi vibe to it. But I know you eventually went on to co-write at least one song with Bon Jovi. I just couldn't imagine sitting in a room with someone like that, or like Keith Urban, like that, to see them as a regular person with all the lights and cameras stripped away. Like that must take a bit, especially as like a small town guy from Cape Breton. Like I remember, I talked to your buddy Ashley McIsaac about this. I ran into him once at the mall, and I was like falling over myself to see such a star. But to be to be with these kind of people, like that's the real deal.
Yeah, it is, and it doesn't happen every day, obviously, right? But that is, looking back, there's some great moments that you get to hang with people like that. But it's no surprise that they're just people. They're just dudes. And in the case of Bon Jovi, that I do remember being a little bit anxious. I normally don't get too nervous about a co-write like that, but the Bon Jovi one was just a little bigger than your average one. And I met them at a hotel in downtown Nashville, and went up to the room, and I had my sunglasses on in the middle of the day. I kind of wasn't taking them off in the room because I think my anxiety level was a little higher than usual. But I kind of sat down with John, and I'd heard you hear all these stories about, oh, he's such an asshole, and he this and that, and you have all these predispositions for them. And that one of the fun things is that usually all that stuff is just dead wrong. I wrote a song with him and Richie. I think Richie was divorcing somebody in the next hotel room, so he wasn't in the room much, but he would pop in and out. But it was mostly John and I, and at one point I still smoked cigarettes at the time, and I was like, I'm croaking for a cigarette. Do you mind, guys? I'll be right back. And John's like, oh, screw it. We'll just hang one out the window. And I wish I had a picture of it. So there's a little tiny window where John's, I didn't know he smoked. So we, both of our heads, and of course my head is, I've got enough head for the whole band on my shoulders here. So I don't know how it even fit, but the two of us were hanging out the little window, smoking, trying not to get caught in the hotel. And we wrote a cool song. It was the only time I wrote with them, and they cut it. It was great.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've wrote so many songs through your career for so many different people and for yourself. Are there any songs in particular that are like, your most precious babies?
Yeah, I mean, often they're often ones that never get cut, and that's a great question. I would think if we sat down and had a beer and I was playing a couple of songs and you asked me that, I would probably play you a couple of things that you've never heard, and really no one else in the world has either. But me and the writers and I that wrote it, it's one of our favorites.
Interesting. But yeah, it really seems like no matter how good the songs are, you really need to find the right person, for in the right time for it to be a match. Just like my favorite picture with Guy Clark, that's just like lightning in a bottle. To find him to sing that song was so perfect. And then I mentioned this earlier, but then Willie Nelson is put it on an album now as well, and I think he's doing really well with it. Yeah,
it did really well. I mean, the irony with that is that the songs I want to write, and kind of same with anybody I write with, they'll tell you some version of the same thing. What we want to write is something we can use our craft on, and something that uses all of the things and wisdom and emotions and feelings and everything we've accrued over time. What country music asks us to write is a completely different thing. Okay, so so what happens is that most of us spend most of the time writing songs that are too cool for school. They're often not. I'm not saying my own songs are cool, but they fail at becoming a radio hit because that target market is soccer moms dropping their kids off at school at 8:30. So they don't want to hear My Favorite Picture of You. They want to bop to something, or they want a ditty, right? So it's kind of like spending your whole life learning how to paint, the most Van Gogh or Monet inspired paintings, you can, and then getting a job painting by numbers. So you can't actually use the skills, so, and that it's not a bad thing. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And so you're constantly reminding yourself of that.
Interesting. I'm sure throughout your career, you would have been to some pretty strange, like, writing sessions and weird events and stuff. Like, is there anything that stands out there? Any stories you can share of some of the more memorable kind of writing sessions or performances or whatnot that you had?
Gosh, I'm really bad for being put on the spot. There are so many, I can't think of one. I know that's a terrible answer, but...
Well, you wrote with Ashley McIsaac. I'm sure you could probably list any night with Ashley.
Ashley was definitely... That was a trip. I mean, I love Ashley. I don't get to see him very often, and
Hell yeah.
and I got a nice hang-in with him last summer at the Gaelic College, just randomly. And Ashley's he's so bright. Mind you, he's over there on, I don't know, on the far side of one of the sides, but nevertheless, he knows what's going on. But yeah, when I play with him, of course, would have been the early days and the craziest part. Like, I did the first 2 years. I was there really almost from day one with Ashley, like for his first gig, and then I lasted for about a year or two. And then he went on to do even bigger shows. Like, his thing really blew up after that. And mind you, it burned hot and it burned fast, but it was really big. I was kind of out of the band by then. It was just that burned too hot even for me. You know what I mean? So,
he was on my show. Did you hear his when he was on?
I didn't. I have listened to almost every one of your episodes, by the way, Jordan. So I hope next time we do this,
awesome.
I have a bunch of things to interview you about, so maybe we can talk about that
Anytime.
But I haven't heard that yet. I haven't heard the Ashley one yet.
Ashley got pretty weird, I'll tell you. So what's next for you?
Well, we're thriving through the pandemic here, which is it's bizarre that we've been in Cape Breton now for 6 months, so it's been a long time since I've been home that much. It's been wonderful. We'll go back to Nashville. We're just gonna sort of see how it goes in the new year. My daughter's in school here now, so we're not moving back, but we've just if come March. It's sort of safe to go back. It's not just, we're not just here because it's not safe in Nashville. That's just part of it. Like, for people that do what I do, we're so used to collaborating in person. None of us have ever collaborated via Skype or Zoom or anything really. I haven't. I mean, some writers probably have, but before the pandemic, and now it's every day. Now it's what the very program that we're using right now is what I write songs on every day, and it's very challenging. Musicians will appreciate this because of the latency. Okay, so if you pick up a guitar right now and strum it, and I pick up a guitar and strum it, what happens. There's a second, half a second or quarter, whatever it is, tenth of a second is way too much.
Wow.
Delay between, so that makes collaborating impossible. And you would think that in our day and age that there'd be software and things that would overcome that, but you'd be amazed that there's not. It really comes down to everyone's personal internet connection and things like that. So that's been a challenge to write with that little tenth of a second or half second, whatever it is, delay, is like losing a limb, kind of, when you're writing. I'm sorry to be dramatic, but yeah.
Yeah, but it can be hard enough to have a conversation. Just as you hear now as we talk, it's like you'll finish a sentence in, by the time I start talking, you're not hearing me start yet, so it's hard enough to have a conversation. But when you're talking about playing together in time and harmonizing, I can't even imagine that. But I guess for a lot of people, this is going to be like every job has found a way to transition temporarily to, Skype and Zoom and all this stuff. So I guess you're probably not the only songwriter who's struggling through this, but hopefully it'll be okay.
Yeah, I feel guilty calling it a struggle because I'm pretty lucky to do what I do, but it's just you just didn't see it coming, so you navigate around it,
But this is why you moved to Nashville to begin with, because you could never have what you've done with your career. You could never have done this remotely, by phone or anything. You need to be there to be networking and to be able to show up at the hotels with Bon Jovi.
That's right. And some people are like, well, now that we're so used to Skyping all the time, maybe we'll all just do that more, we pandemic's over. I mean, I doubt it. I highly doubt it. I mean, we will be so sick of that. I mean, I would punch somebody if they asked me to write on Skype after the pandemic's over. I mean, I want to close everyone's going to close the chapter on that. But it's been just fine. The music business is taking a big hit, a big wallop, and even the movie business. There's lots of things in the news this week about, well, certainly in the theater side. The live where people gather, any component of any business where people gather is really starting to get hit hard. So this is going to be interesting coming out of this.
Yeah,
like so many other businesses. It's not like we're alone.
Yeah, but for what you do as like a songwriter and helping artists get their songs put together, it seems like this could be like an opportunity, because I would imagine that a lot of artists are using this time to focus on recording and getting ideas together. Like, would this be a busy time for you, or is everything shut down even on your side of things?
No, it's really busy. I'm really busy. I'm busier than, normally I kind of take a month off in the summer. I didn't even take that off. I kind of wound down a little bit because, once the Cape Breton summer gets going, nobody wants to work, right? But
you got your hours in, so you got your hours in Nashville, so you're on EI all summer.
No, yeah, I'm just like trying to bum my way on a boat somewhere. It's like, hey, I got a guitar, a nice boat. But like, it's been really busy, but and my side of it thankfully hasn't taken a direct hit. The people that depend on live income. The one thing I will say is that I think for anybody that does this or what I do, like if you have a bunch of downtime, and I'm not trying to tell you what to do or anything, but I think it's inevitable that you have to realize that when we come out of this, the ball will bounce back up, and it'll bounce back really hard. And everybody is going to be really good. Everybody has learned how to do everything on their. Everybody has that didn't have a microphone and didn't know how to make a beat before the pandemic now knows how to do that. And it's going to be really competitive coming out of it. If you're a songwriter producer, for example, where you were the only guy in town, if you were 1 in 50 that did it, you're going to be maybe 1 in 10 now or something, or 1 in 5. It's like it's something to keep in the back of your mind, I think. And then anybody that kind of isn't using that time to get better at their craft and their skills may find that they're, myself included, that you just get maybe on the back of the bus a little bit coming out of it.
Yeah. Well, it's the same with podcasting. What the kind of the joke we've had is that, do you know what the CERB is?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's like the government benefit people. The joke is that the biggest sponsor of podcasts in 2020 has been the CERB.
Yeah.
Because so many people are off work and they're like, I'll start a crime podcast with my wife while we're, off work. So it's there's a lot of that sort of thing going on. But one last question I want to ask, and this is something I've always wondered about songwriting. The order the names appear in, like if this song, Jesus Take the Wheel and it will list all the credits, like the order of the names, does that have like that involves ownership or whatever of the song?
That's what a great question. I mean, I've never had that question. I've never even thought about it. I don't think. I mean, I don't think there's. I mean, it's typically ladies first. I would say so. Usually, the lady or ladies in the room are credited first, and there's probably a degree of whoever the name is that's most recognizable, maybe is thrown in there first. I mean, I get that. That's just, but other than that, Jordan, I don't think, to my knowledge anyway, there's really a rhyme or reason to it.
Okay, I always wondered if that had had to do with like the percentage of ownership or something, because kind of I don't know if this is a commonly passed around myth or whatever, but I've just heard stories of like artists maybe like a performer who would have a small amount of input on the actual songwriting, but would want like to be the main credited writer. Like, is that a common thing in your world to deal with that sort of thing?
Yeah. It does happen with some artists. I mean, and you must realize too that it's often not the artist that's causing that. It's the people around the artist that, like, for example, Beyonce was famous for, Jordan, if you and I wrote a song right now, let's say, and somehow it found its way to Beyonce's camp and they're like, oh, she loves this, she wants to record it. She'll record it if she takes 50% of it. You guys take 25% of it each. So you're kind of like, half of you is butthurt, and the other half is like, well, you can't turn this down, right? So because you miss 100% of the shots you don't take or whatever. But what you must realize is that this is not coming from Beyonce. This is coming from some greedy publisher that speaks on her behalf, or maybe a manager or something. So these artists will, kind of get a bad rap for this when they're not even aware it's happening.
Yeah, probably. It's just I guess a part of the business, and yeah, but on the songwriter's end, it would have to be a business decision as well, where it's I'm sure the artists whose management or whatever would behave that way would be artists that can have the clout to do it or the name to do it. But
yeah, it in my experience and everybody else that I talked, it's amazing how it doesn't happen. Like people are good people, the people that by and large, so anybody that for you to get from all the way to the bottom to all the way to the top in country or pop, you kind of have to be certainly in country. I know less about other genres, but you kind of can't do it if you're not a good person. It won't work. Like if you'll get, it's important to be good, and once you can get a reputation really fast if you're kind of pulling stunts like that, and it has a way of weeding out the good folks from the bad folks. Fortunately,
is there, if you could pick any artist to write for, is there someone who would be like your dream gig?
To write for?
Other than AC/DC.
Man, I love AC/DC.
They're the best.
Yeah, I don't know. It's always been a bucket list thing to just be a little bit drunk in the audience for an AC/DC show and just be that guy, And I don't know. I might have missed I don't know if we're gonna get that now, but I just want to just be, 14 again for a day. I mean, I won't feel 14 the next day, but. I don't know. There's just there's so much music that I love, and some of it's old and I grew up with it, and some of it came out last week. And, but I'm actually a pretty massive Pink Floyd fan. I always have been. That's kind of the one band that, like, from 12 years old till right now that I have not wavered on. I watched yet another documentary on them last night. So just because that's fresh in my mind, I would take a co-write with David Gilmour. Or Roger Waters would be more dramatic, I'm sure. he'd be bossier, I would think, and he'd be weirder and just selfish. But of course, I'd do it. And David Gilmour, I think, would probably. I have it in my head. He'd be completely the opposite. He'd be like an English gentleman and very. But I don't know. Who knows?
Well, the funny thing, like just now with you saying that, I could see you really working your style, working great with both those fellas. But maybe they're listening to this podcast, and this will be the break. I would love to make that happen. I'm sure they're listening to it, or their people might be.
Yeah, well, wouldn't that be wonderful? Yeah, that would be amazing.
Let's end on that. Well, Gordie, I can't thank you enough for all this time. It's most people would never have the opportunity to talk to someone in your position, and so I thank you so much for giving me so much of your time and being so open with an industry that very few people know much about.
It's my pleasure, Jordan. I'm a big fan of your show, actually, and it's not uncommon for me to listen to it at night when I go to sleep. I'm just about out of episodes, so it truly is an honor.
You'll hear a familiar voice in the next one. It's going to be weird when you're sleeping to this.
Yeah.
Before I wrap this up, I want to give a huge thank you to Gordie Sampson for taking the time out of his night to talk to me and for admitting publicly that he listens to Nighttime. Gordie, you're truly the best. And with that, I'm going to begin wrapping up this episode. But before I do, I'm going to end with thanks. A huge thank you to XNIMVN for providing the musical score for this episode. It's called Sunny Day, and it heavily samples the classic Italian song Non Dimenticar. Also, a big thank you to downtown Sydney's newest and best bookstore. It's called On Paper Books. And if you're looking for something to get lost in during the holiday, check out On Paper Books. It's on Charlotte Street. And lastly, a massive thank you to everyone who listens to Nighttime. Without your interest and your support, Nighttime would be as pointless as it would be impossible. But with that said, keeping the show alive is and has always been an uphill battle. So if you want to help take some of the weight off the show's shoulders, please subscribe to the premium feed. Not only will it keep the show moving, it'll give you more of each topic than you're going to find on the free feed, as I'm adding exclusive content to the premium feed weekly. So for about the price of a cup of coffee, help keep the show alive by subscribing to the premium feed at patreon.com/nighttime podcast. And having said that, let me thank the newest supporters of the show, Bev Boy Ketty, Lisa Yutko, and Caitlin McLean. Thank you all for your generous support. And for anyone else out there who'd like to support the show but can't help financially, you can give me a big hand by simply sharing the episodes on social media and telling your friends who you think would be interested in what we're doing here. And if any of you have any story ideas or if you want to give feedback on the show, you can reach me at nighttimepodcast.com/contact. I'm also on social media. I use Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I'm live on YouTube every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday night at 9 Eastern. And one last thing before we go. If you want to provide your thoughts on this episode, please send me a voice memo. I'll air your comments and answer any questions you have on the next Nightcap post-show episode. Again, you can reach me and send me that voice memo at nighttimepodcast.com/contact. So until next time, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and go check out some of Gordie's tunes.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte. Copyright Jordan Bonaparte.
This is my favorite picture of my wife, Susanna. Me and Towns were in that house, drunk on our ass, being totally obnoxious, and just she'd finally had enough and just said, "Fuck you guys, I'm leaving." And I think John Lomax was outside and he took that picture of her. A new songwriter I had not met before came over named Gordie Sampson. And he had written that idea down, my favorite picture of you. And I saw it and I read it, he said it. And I immediately snapped to that photograph because it was pinned to my wall right over there. It was just like, I know this whole song.
favorite picture of you is the one where you're staring straight into the lens. It's just a Polaroid shot somebody took on the spot. No beginning, no end. It's just a moment in time you can't have back. You never left, but your bags were packed, just in case. My favorite picture of you is bent and it's faded and it's pinned to my wall. Yeah, and you were so angry, it's hard to believe that we were lovers at all. Fire in your eyes, heart on your sleeve, curse on your lips, but all I can see is beautiful. My favorite picture of you is the one where your wings are showing. Yeah, your arms are crossed, your fists are clenched, you're not gone but gone. Stand up, angel, won't back down. You were nobody's fool, you were nobody's clown. Yeah, you were smarter than that. My favorite picture of you is the one where it hasn't rained yet. Wind is out across the Cayman, winter squall, and we got soaking. 1,000 words in the blink of an eye. The camera loves you, and so do I. Click. My favorite picture of you is the one where you stay